Right, so I think this is all streaming, and I've just come across this new application, and this new application is called Playwright, and I'll go from the beginning. And I just thought, because I'm doing a pip install of everything and starting it from the beginning, that it will be quite useful to do a live cast on it. So that's what I'm doing. And I might even share the live cast onto Twitter. I'm just getting a link for it. So I'm just setting this all up. So copy that link, and I'm just going to tweet this out. Just something like to say, if I can create a tweet, just over here, doing a live stream on YouTube on Playwright. For Python. There we go. I will put it in there, and I will also put a hashtag Python. So tag in Python, and maybe a few people, and maybe I don't know if a hashtag YouTube. Why you YouTube? There we go. That should be sufficient, and that's kind of like this live cast. So there we go, posted on the social media. Maybe some people will join, maybe they won't. And what else was I going to do to set things up? Oh yeah, I was just going to, let's hit close there. I'm also just going to open a little chat session on the side, and I'll just put hello world. There we go, and hit return just to make sure that pops up. So you should see a little chat pop up there as well. It says chat rate 1, but I presume that's myself. And I actually started over here, which is Playwright for Python. So Playwright is something that enables web automation, where you can automate things on the browser effectively. So you can like simulate your browser and go to web pages and do things. And before I was using, I've always used Selenium. Selenium's been okay. It's been quite powerful and good. And I actually did look up something, and I could attempt to go back to having a re-look-up of it. But I did like Selenium versus Playwright. In fact, I've got something over here just on Bard, kind of like I thought I'd put the same thing in, and it kind of like gives you the same stuff. Selenium's supposedly more established and so forth, but I pulled it up and tried to reuse it, and I've always had this problem where you have to point towards the browser that you want to use, and it's a little bit annoying. And then there's other things that you can do to get like an automated browser that pre-installs, and you kind of like got to muck around with it in the beginning. So I'm sort of like fed up of mucking around with Selenium, so I thought maybe I'll take a look at Playwright, and I saw a quick YouTube tutorial on it, so let's just see how simple it really is. So I'm starting right from scratch. I've literally only seen Playwright literally within the last, I don't know, not even 30 minutes. So I was here, and you know the Python bit is here. So in fact, I'm going to hit back just to get back to where I was. I was at the installation section of it, getting started in the installation. So I've done in my little browser over here, so not this one. In fact, I will close this down because I don't want to have the confusion of having two things open all the time. It's a bit annoying. But I've done over here, I haven't created even a file yet, so that's what I'm about to do. So let me just maximize this as well in terms of size so that we can see it. But if I do a control plus 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 just to zoom in a little bit, what I have done in the terminal was I did a Python -m pip install pytest playwright, which is the installation from over here. Basically I copied this, but I do a Python -m first, so that installs it to the current version of Python. So remember to do that, because you can just copy that, but it won't necessarily be the latest version of Python. So make sure you do that. And then I also did, well, that one ran literally in about 10 seconds or something like that, so that was fine. That was all of this stuff here. And then afterwards, when that was done, somewhere I did a, there we go, a Playwright install, and that seemed to run or download and install, and it says what it actually does here: install a required browser. So it downloaded, I guess, the version to browser, so it downloaded Chromium, and installed it, and a couple of other components that I'm not aware of necessarily, like I don't know what this WebKit is. Downloading WebKit 17, downloading Firefox, FFmpeg, Playwright build. Okay, so a few things that it's downloaded, but couple of things I do notice, which is Firefox and Chromium. So I'm hoping it works on Google Chrome, I guess. And then there's a test example here. So create a test my application.py file inside the current working directory or in a subdirectory with the code below. So I've got this open, so I'm going to make a file and I'm just going to call it test. I guess I'm going to call it test and playwright. So let me just copy that bit there. So I will create a new file and I'm going to call it test_playwright.py. So simple as that. To get it running, I'll do this just so that it's in the interactive Python as well. I don't know if I'm going to run it in the interactive session or not. Maybe I'll close the interactive session for now. We'll just see. And I don't need this thing open on the side anymore. So let's just give ourselves a tiny bit more room on the side. And then I will go to back to here, add test example. I think I can copy this whole thing out here. RE's for regular expressions. I haven't used that one for ages and ages. So let's just paste that in there. And give it a second or so, I guess, because I was hoping everything would turn green, but it hasn't. Save. I wonder if I have to close it and reopen, possibly. So let's have a look. And actually, I think, oh no, I did actually removed all of that, but I had my Selenium attempt. So I got the Selenium thing here, and what I had to do, but it stopped working, and I just got a bit annoyed with it. This was the old version of it, and like there's hundreds of comments on Stack Overflow of people trying to use Selenium, and you can't just do like driver equals webdriver.chrome. You have to start doing these other things. You have to start using the Chrome driver manager, or you have to point to the path of Chrome. And if you and the path of Chrome keeps on changing every other month or something like that, so your code keeps breaking and you have to find a new place to point to manually. That's a bit annoying, so you can use Chrome Driver Manager, and then this Chrome Driver Manager.install over here. But when I try to do that, I wonder if this one actually works at 5. It's probably also going to fail, I guess. This was something that was working a while ago. Does it work? Kind of looks like it's hanging at this point in time, or not doing anything. So I wonder what it is doing. I can see that it is running, but there we go. We get this thing, no such driver by URL, and I've got to go and attempt to somehow fix this, or I've probably got to do a pip install of something. It's something like WebDriver Manager or something like that I have to do a pip install of that. Maybe I didn't do that. So there's kind of like 2 pip installs. But maybe if the Playwright thing's one level simpler, we can use that. Anyway, so Playwright's in there. And okay, that's the world's longest name of a function that I've ever seen. It's breaching PEP32 with the length of the name of your function. Test homepage has Playwright in title and get started linking to the intro page. Okay, right, this one definitely deserves a if. No, in fact, I'll just use this template, main template. Right, this is going to be a little bit better, and then from this one, this will be the main entry point of the code. Let me just paste it up here somewhere, just to make it a little bit nicer looking, and then I'm going to take all of this text, because it's a massive piece of text, and this is really worthy of a doc string, I presume, so something like this, and let's get rid of all of the spaces in here as well. Okay, anyway, over here I'm just going to reduce it to delete all of this. I'm going to keep the Playwright bit. I'll lowercase that because we're in Python, not in other languages. Right, that's a little bit nicer, and in the main now we will do test Playwright. There we go, that's much cleaner. Right, we've got a main entry point for the code, and let's just tidy this up a little bit. So usually I assume that people that make the modules actually are better Python coders than myself, but it appears to be not. I mean, okay, I guess you can have a function like that, a function name like that. That was over naming the, like, it's nice to have functions that have names that are useful, but I think that was over naming. Anyway, it requires this argument called page. I don't even know what page is. So our imports go here, so I'll just move that as well, X that, put that up at the top. I'm going to hit save for now. I'll just go back. Because let's have a look. Page, right. Create a test application file inside the current directory, working directory with the code below, and then you want to run it. Okay. Did I not copy all of the stuff? I did. Right. Oh, see, it's got a test my application. By default, tests will be run on Chromium. This can be changed. Tests are run in headless modes, meaning no browser UI will open up when running tests. The result of tests will be logged to the terminal. I don't know what, like, because page here needs to be passed into this, and I don't know what page is. Is page.goto? I don't know what page is. That's a bit of a questionable bit over here, so I can't necessarily get this running off the bat. Import page, but what actually is it? Like, because I should be calling this function somehow to run it. This function wouldn't have run on its own even had I hit F9 or F5 to run it in within, because you need to call a function. It's not showing me where I call a function. So I'm not 100% sure on that. What is page anyway then? Okay, and expect, that doesn't look like really good either, because I wasn't expecting that to come up in blue. Normally that should come up in green as well. So if I try to run this, well, it's going to throw an error message because it's going to say you're expecting this variable page, but what is this for class page? I literally don't know what this is. F5, I'm going to try and run it. It's going to fail. So I'm not liking the docs missing one required positional argument. Well, of course it is required argument page, but I don't know what page should be. And then let's say page as an empty string. There we go. Let's try and do that. I don't know what's going to happen, but at least it's going to go into the function. Okay, failed. Stop that. Because normally what I would expect somewhere in this is that page would be defined, and page should be defined over here somewhere, like page equals page, presumably. That's what it might, I don't know, page is an empty class, page, maybe page equals page. Page equals page, there we go. And try that. No, okay. One missing required argument, implied object. Okay. Let's see what should go in here then. Okay, I guess we can do that bit. So I don't know, that bit isn't working, so let's just try a different version of this. So running a test example, not a very good start. Normally you should be able to like copy and paste these things straight in and they should work straight off the bat, so I'm very unhappy with that. Let's click and continue writing tests. Let's have a look. The expect function, okay. Okay, still don't, I'm just browsing through here to see how I can get any of this stuff working. I don't see how any of this works at this point in time. Because like even if I was to take this just like this, and you can use various fixtures to explain. You need to be able to call your function, but what do you call your function with? To see how writing a test using locators and web first assertions auto expect to continue on this. Running tests. Test generator. I might have to go and do my own YouTube tutorials on this. Import, okay, that's in a different language because that's JavaScript by the look of it, because of the arrows. Right, okay. Okay, what I'm going to do is basic Playwright. There we go. I'm going to put this into Claude AI and maybe I'll get a bit more of sensible code. I'm really unhappy with the code that I saw there because it's not Python. It doesn't make sense in terms of coding. But let's just see what happens here. Okay, this one seems to be at least a little bit clearer. Here is a basic example of using Playwright in Python to automate browser testing. So let's just try this one. I could actually have done copy code there, but let's just try this. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's just give this a bash. Maybe I've been too fast reading the code, who knows. That with statement, I'll put in def new test, there we go, and we've got our function there, and something like, I have to paste all of the code in here, and everything in the with statement, because that was written as a script, I'm putting it into a function. I'm going to do one level of indentation, and I think X, I'll cut that out, X, and paste that into the top. Right, okay, sync Playwright. Okay, so we had this before, that was from our earlier one. This is from our newer version over here, and this is our new, I've just created this function, a new test, and it says here browser equals p chromium. Here is what I probably should have had, page equals browser.new page. I wonder. Like, why wasn't that in the docs? So I'm imagining that this piece of code here that I'm seeing, this piece of code here, should proceed, because that's what I was guessing at, over here. I'm going to get the indentation right, which is that. But then even that, you'd have P equals this, basically. So you'd have to have P equals and then sync.playwright. That's what that would have required, I imagine. You'd have to do it with it. Okay then. With all of this, these two components, and then presumably test playwright page. Now, I know I've literally just nicked this piece of code, or these 3 lines of code, straight out of Claude AI. So I've nicked it out of this example here to get something, because this where is it on our thing here, on the test playwright? Yeah, this our test playwright function needed an argument, and the argument needed a page, and page is browser.newPage, and that comes from browser.pchronium.launch, or some sort of launcher, which comes from that. So maybe it will work. We're not going to run the new test thing. All we're going to run at the moment is this example piece of code that was given to us, and if the name was made, so that should all be fine now. So I presume that that's calling that. Let's have a little test now, F5 to run it. We'll get a little bit further, we'll move into the code at least. So it might crash, but it's doing some thinking at least. And well, it finished the code, but it didn't do anything in particular. We could do something like just over here, print, just to show that you got in, the test has started. Okay, and then something like at the end, print, the test ended. I'm literally just checking to see what actually happens. Run that again. Okay. Are we gracefully ending, or okay? The test has started, so we've entered the code, and the test has ended. So all of this stuff has been run. I don't know what we were expecting to get out of it, but at least we know that now that's how to get that piece of code running. So not amazed still, but got that piece of code running. I needed to do these 3 bits, so it wasn't the case. You couldn't just copy the original code. So I guess you have to understand, or maybe I didn't. I'm just going to assume that I didn't read the docs, but the docs are normally very clear on this kind of stuff. So writing tests. Maybe they're just examples of writing tests. So okay, running test, writing test generator test. Maybe there's actual like examples somewhere down below. Videos. So there's a video on it. Screenshots. Test generator. Trace view integrations. Downloads. Browsers. Chrome extensions. Assertions. Okay. So go through all there. Isolation. Okay. Getting started library. Pip install Playwright install. Okay, there's some condas. This is a usage here. Once installed, you can import Playwright in a Python script and launch any of the 3 browsers, Chrome, Firefox, or WebKit. Maybe this is a bit more useful, this getting started bit, than the writing tests. Possibly. Maybe I went to the wrong page. So, and it looks like maybe I have, because this is a bit more concise. So let me just control, no. It's shift. There we go. Zoom in. I'm going to now take this code here. Just zoom in a bit. So I'm going to go to this usage part now instead, which is this getting started library, and I'm going to simplify everything, which is, well, this is what we had before. So let's just go back. I'm going to remove absolutely everything, although at least we know to some extent it's working. We'll keep our main over there, but we're going to have something else. And I guess we keep this line of code here because that's the import. Because what we're doing is copying this script. So from playwright.sync_API import sync_playwright. So that's that line of code over there. And then we will copy this piece of code into our little example. So define a function and paste that in here and make sure that we get our indentations in Python correct. Why did I do that? I wanted to do a tab on everything, so let's just tab all of that in. There we go, and we will call this test. Playwright. There we go, test playwright. So now we're going to run our code. We're going to have to call it then. So let's just do test_playwright. And what's actually going to happen anyway? Let's have a look. Once you've installed, you can import Playwright in a Python script and launch any of the 3 browsers. The one that's being launched here is Chromium. That's perfectly fine. It looks like it's navigating to a page. It's going to print the title of the page and then it's going to close the browser. Okay, that's fair enough. Let's just run it then in that case. So we should expect, I'm going to hit clear over here, clear over here, and in fact what I'll do is, well, I'm going to do a Control J just over there, and I'm going to run it, so it's going to launch in the interactive Python. So I'll just do Control Return. It launches on the side. It's just a little bit nicer for various different tests and so forth. So there we go, launching on the side. This is Playwright. It's taken nearly 30 minutes to get this working. Still doesn't work. Looks like you're using. It looks like you are using Playwright. Please use async API instead. Okay. Oh, here we go. Playwright sync API inside of an asynchronous loop. Okay. So I can't run it in the interactive because of that error message. I have to run it like this, which is an F5, because asynchronous stuff doesn't work inside of the interactive Python. And we're looking for a title. Okay, fine. So it's finally worked. Okay, so that first piece works. Wasn't the cleanest, but get it working in half an hour. Playwright supports 2 variations of the API, synchronous and asynchronous. If your modern project uses async.io, you should use async API. Now, I don't mind this async.io. I've written things asynchronously before, but one of the things that's a little bit annoying with async.io, and I prefer threading, is that everywhere in async.io, when you're using it for asynchronous programming, and there is an advantage to it. The advantage of async.io is you've got the user has more control over how the asynchronous function works, and there's some edge cases where you can get race conditions that threading in theory couldn't handle, but the fact is that it actually could handle it, because you can lock pieces of code and unlock them. So we could use this as well. So I could do this, which is we'll make our second piece of code, which is, so this is our synchronous version, I guess. That's our test Playwright, and I'll make this new folder here now, which is file test. underscore playwright asynchronous.python, stick that in there and paste the code in here. And the asynchronous, again, if I try to run this, if I do put it in the interactive session, so just by doing that, or if it was in a Jupyter notebook per se, so if I do run this, maybe the async IO will, no, I don't think it will work. I'd have expected to get, I always get the error message for async IO in the interactive and not the synchronous version, so that was a little bit odd that did come about, but whatever. Let's just see. Yeah, we get the same thing. Async IO.run, this is the error message that I'm used to getting. Async IO.run cannot be called from a running event loop. And that always tends to happen in the interactive Python because it behaves a bit like a Jupyter notebook. Whereas I was expecting that the synchronous would work. But anyway, both of them have to be run like this. So if I do run it again, I guess we'll get the page title. The piece that's a tiny bit annoying, by the way, in doing the asynchronous programming, is you have this async io.run main, which is a bit like the if name equals main guard, because that's the thing that's going to launch the code and go into the main module. And this main module is an async module, and then everything inside it, so you've got like an async with, and the browser equals await. Now the await thing's kind of like necessary, because it's saying wait for Chrome to launch, page equals await browser. So wait for this new thing, and to await everywhere on every single line. It just gets, so it, you know, we can compare them in a way side by side because I've got them open. But yeah, this one doesn't have all of the extra pieces in there, and this will run synchronously, and the other one won't. So okay, it's taken about 35 minutes now, 30 minutes to get the synchronous and the asynchronous both working, but they do both work because we've got the page title, which is the fast and reliable end-to-end testing for modern web apps Playwright. So that's what it is. At least I didn't need to install other pieces and so forth. Now, in our first web script, we'll navigate to playwright.dev and take a screenshot in WebKit. Okay, that's quite nice. Let's try and take a screenshot in WebKit then. So it's using the sync Playwright, which I much prefer. Although I still I have a little piece of a bother about this, which is that I should have been able to run it in the interactive session. Let me just see what that error message is a second time and have a proper read through this error message. It's just connecting to Python 3.11. There's a new version of Python coming out, which is 3.12, which has things on the F strings, which is better. It looks like you are using Playwright sync API inside the async IO loop. I don't quite get that. I don't understand fully what the error message is, because why am I using the sync inside the async IO loop? So I'm not sure about that. Please use async API instead. I'm not sure what that refers to, because it does work outside of the interactive, but it's just basically telling me at this point I can't use the interactive Python for it. The interactive Python's really useful, but anyway, I can't use it. So let's continue then. We'll call our script first script, right? So let's just do def. We'll define a function again, but we will call our function first underscore script, just because we don't know what else to call it. And this was an initial test to get the browser, I guess we got the browser title right, to print the browser title. Now I could kind of like modify this a little bit, which is probably a bit nicer, which is that we could do I guess I say title equals page dot title right? And then we don't have to do the print here. Then we've got the browser.close, and we can actually return title, which is probably a nicer way of doing it. We have more control flow, and we've got like our result is equal to this. And what this is going to return back, presumably, is a string. So we could tell our function. I think our function, yeah, it says it recognizes it's a string from the type hinting, although we could suggest something. But basically, then we will do print result like this, and it's a little bit nicer because we've passed the title back in as a return value from our function into this variable here, this res variable, and then we print out the variable, which does exactly all of the same stuff basically. So it's a little bit cleaner. We're not going to be using this Playwright soon because we're going to do our first script, but anyway, it's going to run and it should print out exactly the same stuff, which it does. Great, good work. So our first script is going to contain all of this, and it's going to do the screenshot here. In fact, what I'm going to do is take this out and paste it straight into this bit here, which is our doc string. And then, do we have any arguments going in? No, I don't think we have any arguments going in. We can put arguments that go in here. We'll do this with, we're going to have this with statement again. So paste all of that in there. And again, one thing about Python, which is a tiny bit annoying, is whenever you copy and paste code, you've got to sort of like do the indentation and handle it all yourself. It's okay for tiny snippets of code, but if you had like some long piece of code and you lost your indentation, that's really annoying. I tend to just put things on the first line and kind of like tab them, and it sort of like sorts itself out. But yeah, you know, I'm not sure what would happen. You know, I've had codes that are about 1,000 lines long, or maybe 2,000 lines long. But if you had like a 20 or 30,000 line piece of code, it might get a little bit annoying. But anyway, we've got our first script now. And one thing that we could do, although it says navigate to this, we could navigate to any page in particular. So we could make this like an argument in our function. But for now, we won't. What we'll actually do, it says in our first script, we will navigate to this playwright.dev link and then take a screenshot in the WebKit, and it's going to save the screenshot to example.png, and then I'm going to have to search somewhere for example.png. But let's just get this done. So the nice thing about doing it like this is that we can have res equals and then first script. It's sort of like nice and clean, and we can comment. We don't even need to print the result out, but here, okay, what's actually going to happen, we could just return true, for example. There we go, with return a boolean, right? Or even do we want to return something? I don't know. We don't have to print the result because we get true. Actually, Control Z. I'll keep that in there. We'll just print that. We'll get true at the end. So we know we've finished our line of code basically. So we just comment this one out, and we're going to run the first script, and F5 to run it. And I just got to wonder where it goes, but I'm going to have to search for an example.png somewhere in my file system, because I don't know if example.png will end up down the bottom. Right, it said true, which is quite nice, which means we've got to the end of the code. And I'm just going to scroll down here. I don't know where it will go. I don't see an example.png down here. There's hundreds and hundreds of tests, as you can see. That's in our little test section. So I'd have expected it to be there. I'm going to have to do a little search somewhere, I guess, for it. So I don't see it anywhere in here. Ah, there we go, example.png. And whoopee, it works. Very nice. So, okay, 40 minutes in, we're able to do something a tiny bit nicer now. So fantastic, we made good progress then. we're able to do synchronous, we're able to do asynchronous. We were able to get the titles of 2 pages. Now we're able to do a screenshot of a page. So let's tab across to see what the next thing is. By default, Playwright runs the browsers in headless mode. I kind of think I prefer that, but every now and again we will want to see browser UI past the headless equals false flag if we wanted to do that. So we launched this in, I don't even know what we did, p.webkit browser.new page. Browsing WebKit launch, I don't know. Slow-mo 50. Let's just try this out, right? Which is, I'm going to call it second script actually. So, and we're going to use this thing here, which is this headless. And I'm thinking that I just stick this headless thing into whatever .launch. So here is where the headless would go in. I'm just going to call this I guess I'll call it second script because I'm not that original. Or first script. Headless. It's actually not headless, it's headed. I don't know what the opposite of headless is. Headed, H-E-A-D-E-D. There we go, headed. So let's try this in headed mode. Let's try this in headed mode. Cut that and paste it straight into the launch. I guess this slow-mo here is going to, I don't even know what the slow-mo is. Let's have a look. Let's see if we've got something on what tells us what slow-mo is. But basically, let's have a look. Scroll down. Parameters, path, args if true. I don't see the slow-mo thing unless I scroll past it. Timeout, that's maximum timeout. I'm presuming it just slows it down. Slow-mo union, here we go. Slows down the Playwright operations by the specified amount of milliseconds, useful so that you can see what is going on. This is 50 milliseconds, which is 50 divided by 100. I should actually slow paste that in here basically. There we go. That's what this slow-mo does. So I'm going to now run that, F5. But 50 milliseconds is actually this. Well, let's have a look. Let's just see what happens. I presume that we'll see. I'm wondering what we'll see launch because I've just left it as WebKit and I didn't use like Chrome or Firefox. And I didn't actually see anything happen. I presume the file was still saved because that would have been somewhere down the bottom, example.png. I wonder if, like, I'm not sure we'll have seen anything different there. Wonder if we can see the properties of that file just to verify that it's changed. But that headless didn't do that much, but maybe it needed to be done. Oh, hold on. The reason why, actually, sorry, is I haven't actually, I just called the first script again. So we have to call our first script, but this time headed. So I'm going to call this first script headless. Right, there we go. We're not even going to use a headless one now anyway, so we're going to go headed. So we're going to run that piece of code. And because we copied, yeah, that's all fine now. So that should run in headless mode and maybe we'll see something launch. But I was just going to do this, which is 50 milliseconds is 50 divided by 1/1000 of a second, so it's 0.05 seconds. So it's kind of like you could get 20 pages in a second if I'm right there, because 0.05, 5 times 20 is 100, yeah. So anyway, let's just try and run it. We're in headed mode now. Will we see anything happen or not? Yeah, there we go. It's kind of like on the side, and then it closed itself. Something might have popped up there. I wonder if I get a second chance to do it. But anyway, let's open up the example.png. It's still there. Okay. Maybe I can pull it across in time. If I do that again, F5 to run it. I've got to sort of grab the bar and move it across in time so it gets onto the screen. So, or I can make the slow-mo a bit longer. Well, is the alternative version of that. So there we go. It's kind of like there. It's done its thing and it's closed. I didn't need to make the slow-mo quicker. I did it in my reaction time is in 0.05 of a second. Very fast. That's quite good. I can make a game just for like moving browsers onto the page. So okay, we've done that. We could pass this whole thing here as an argument here. We could pass this screenshot like the path that we want to save it somewhere as well. But let's just move on and see what else we've got. So what else can we do? And then we'll kind of like close the session up because we've got like 45 minutes. Interactive mode REPL. Okay, you can launch the interactive Python REPL. Well, I was trying to do that, but it didn't work. So did that. Okay. It's got this piece here. Okay, so it's slightly different, and then launch Playwright within it for quick experimentation, which is what I was trying to do in the beginning. So I take this code and I'm going to make a new Playwright. So I'm going to call it test Playwright underscore REPL. I can't remember exactly what REPL stands for. I'll pull it up. But test underscore Playwright REPL dot py. Stick that in there, because then we can use the interactive Python or a Jupyter notebook. I'm using the interactive Python because it's, I don't know, a little bit nicer. The interactive Python is a Python file that kind of like behaves like a notebook, and I think now if I do Control J just to get rid of this side bit there, like that, so we don't need it. Use Playwright Chromium, Playwright WebKit. So, and I didn't need to change that thing. I didn't need to have Chromium before. Like, you know, I had that WebKit in there. I just had whatever the default was. Now it's got Chromium in there. I'll hit Control S just to make sure that that one runs, and then I'll do Control Return just to run this and just see what happens. Let me just close the Explorer bar on the side, and there we go. We're in the interactive bit now again. Let's see if it doesn't throw an error message, because it threw an error message last time. I think it might be fine because of this playwright.start thing and this playwright.stop, which is the usual thing that you see potentially. No, it still didn't allow for it, so it didn't help any better. I wonder if I do an F5 just to make sure that it does work. I will do that same screenshot. In the interim, I just have to remind myself and everyone else REPL in Python. I think it's in other languages as well. Read something and something. Very slow today, Bard AI. Zoom in a bit. Read, evaluate, print loop, that's what it is. And it's interactive programming environment, takes a single expression, user input, then evaluates and returns in the REPL. I think maybe it's just in like this thing here. So basically I presume that I couldn't put it into, so if I was to take all of this, and somewhere I've got Stack Overflow thing that I was doing, and I was trying to do Venn diagrams, I'll just go straight over that. So all of this presumably should work. There we go. Right, and run this little block of code. This is all self-containing. I wonder if this will work. No, it won't. It won't work in a Jupyter notebook. You can't do a testing. It looks like you are using Playwright sync API inside an async IO loop. Please use the async API instead. So that's not going to work here. So fine, we'll just stick with regular Python. Just save that out and go back to this one here. So okay, fine. Anyway, it's not hugely necessary in the sense that, because anyway this is the async mode. I'll close the async down. I'll probably not only close the REPL thing down, but I'll actually delete it, which is, so it's here. I will, no need to have it, it's fine. Let's just test Playwright. I'm just going to delete this, which is delete. No need for, I shall want to delete it in the REPL, move to recycle bin. Yes, there we go, that's going to be gone. And we continue, because anyway we can write these little functions and they're actually much more convenient. So it's a better way of doing it, because afterwards if I import this module somewhere and I did have any functions that were useful here, then I could actually use those functions. So kind of like a little library or module. Well, it's a little module in itself. So let's go back, let's see what else we can get. So we're not using the read evaluate print loop, which is what the REPL is. Python -m async. Okay, PyInstaller. You can use Playwright with PyInstaller to create standalone executables. Okay. If you want to bundle browsers with executables, you need to do this. Okay, and Bash will be for Linux. I presume Batch is for Mac, iOS, and PowerShell, I'm guessing, is for Windows. Is probably how it goes. Let's have a look. You can create standalone executable. So you can make this main.py, and you can go and get this screenshot, and then PowerShell. Oh, is it a batch file here? That's probably for Windows, maybe. And you create a batch file, a BAT file, and then you could just run your BAT file straight from your PC, which will Playwright install Chromium, PyInstaller -f main.py. Okay, and then just, I guess, just run it, I guess. Building browsers with executables will generate bigger binaries. It is recommended only to only bundle the browsers you use. Okay. Known issues. Time.sleep leads to an outdated state. So I think we're at the end of at least the initial section, and this is the bit that I actually want to read to actually, which is threading, because that's a bit more like useful. Because if you don't want to go down, I want to sidestep. Although async IO is gives the user more control, I just don't like using all of that extra async IO language if I can avoid it. And if I see threading, I'm more inclined to try to attempt to use it, just because I keep on forgetting the await keyword left, right, and center, and those little bits and bobs in async IO await async IO.sleep, because you can't do a time.sleep. Anyway, time.sleep leads to an outdated state. Most likely you don't need to wait manually, since Playwright has auto waiting. Okay, so we don't need to do any of these time.sleeps. I had to do a lot of time.sleeps in Selenium. So that's one nice feature that won't have to do. If you still rely on it, you should use page.wait for timeout, and Selenium does actually offer something like that, where you wait for expected conditions or something like that. You wait for something to be loaded on the browser before you continue. So instead of time.sleep, and it's better not to wait for a timeout at all. And it is better not to wait for a timeout at all, but sometimes it is useful for debugging. Well, I'm presuming that this wait for timeout is basically because you might wait indefinitely if you wait for a page to load and it never loads, and then you'll hang your code. In these cases, use our wait for timeout method instead of the time module. Okay. This is because we internally rely on asynchronous operations, and when using time.sleep, they can't get processed correctly because time.sleep is synchronous, it's blocking. So this is asynchronous code in some way. Incompatible with selector event loop of async IO on Windows, so that doesn't look good because I'm using Windows. But I don't fully know the implications of that one. So Playwright runs the driver in a sub-process, so it requires proactive event loop of async IO Windows, because select event loop does not support async IO sub-process. On Windows Python 3.7, Playwright sets the default event loop to proactive event loop, as is the default on 3.8 plus. Okay, I bypass that in my head. I'm sure it will have some meaning, but it doesn't at the moment. And then finally, threading. Playwright's API is not thread safe. If you are using Playwright in a multi-threaded environment, you should create a Playwright instance per thread. Okay, see threading issues for more details. So a couple of warnings on those things. Maybe you have to use, well, I guess you have to use it in the recommended way. So you might have to use the async IO, might have to go down that route. Or, well, anyway, we are basically, which is using the, if we're not using the async IO thing, that we're using this sync Playwright method over here. And I guess if I hover over it, no, it doesn't give us anything about that. But I presume that I could ask, I keep saying Bard, but it's not, it's Claude now because I'm using Claude. What does do? I should really look it up in the docs, but sometimes this is a little bit clearer. So I'm sure it knows what I was doing, because so long as I spoke about it before and I did ask about Playwright, it will get it in the context of everything. So it is answering the question now. So let me just scroll down if I can. Everyone's struggling to scroll down. So here is the sync Playwright function. In Playwright, Python provides you with synchronous context, a synchronous context manager for controlling the browser. So we use it like this. Okay, fine. And you put your browser control in here, basically inside this with statement. It has a few key effects. Launches a Playwright context in the background, automatically closes it on exit. That's because we've used this with statement. Provides a Playwright P object to control browsers. Okay. Makes Playwright APIs synchronous instead of async. Handles timeouts, crashes, etc. Easier to use like classic Selenium. Okay. That's probably from stuff above X is talking about other things. Without sync Playwright, we'd have to manage Playwright asynchronously. So you'd have to use async IO. All API calls would need to be awaited. So again, that's the bit that I really don't want to bother having to do, but there must be cases when it's needed. More complex error handling required, and that's kind of like one of the things I want to avoid. So, you know, I think I would tend to use this sync Playwright to start with. In summary, it simplifies its usage to become synchronous, abstracts browser management, which is quite nice because I didn't have to do anything. I could just use the default of whatever it was. Provides a Playwright object to control browsers and handles errors and timeouts. So makes Playwright scripts easier to write like Selenium. Okay, fine. So Playwright sync, I guess, is close to Selenium. Does Selenium have an async version? I don't know, because I've only ever used it synchronously. So I think I'll call it. We've come up to the hour. hit the like button, the subscribe button, the follow button, and every other button. That's good. Leave your comments for sure. I've come to the end of this section. So we were looking at Playwright. We've got a few things to work. We've got the main module with a couple of different tests in there. There's a lot more to do and muck around with, but that's kind of like the end of this session. So thank you for watching, and we'll see what happens. Bye.